Here we are, it's a hot September day, 2010, and today we are hosting David Ellsworth, who is one of, if not the, certainly one of the prime wood turners in the world, I would say. And it's one of our symposiums. It is put on by Orange County wood turners, and we're just really happy to have you here. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
I want to talk a little bit about you and how you got started in wood turning and what keeps you going.
Well, I got started in my, like so many other men in the era, in my 8th grade wood shop class.
Oh, yeah.
And that was in Iowa City, Iowa. And then we moved to Colorado, and I turned through high school. Then I gave it up for 10 years to do the military and the academic work in sculpture. So when I got out of the university in '73, it was the height of affirmative action. I was the wrong everything. I couldn't get a job. So I went back to wood turning and started to pursue it almost like a potter would in relation to vessel forms as opposed to, say, bowls or candle holders.
Mm-hmm.
So my interest expanded to the point where I finally got within these forms that I couldn't get inside with the tools that I was using. So I developed a series of angle turning tools, bent tools, that allowed me to get inside of the forms.
Right.
And from that point, I just got braver and braver and blew more pieces up and tried to learn what I was doing. And the proportions of the forms got down to the point where now I can do, as an example, probably a 12-inch diameter sphere out of a hole that's only 5/8 of an inch in diameter, and take the interior down to about 1/8 of an inch all the way through.
Yeah, to me that sounds crazy.
It is crazy,
Yeah.
and it's wonderfully so. But I'm kind of like a wooden potter. I make potterly forms.
It is always wow. You have that cutting point on way deep in there, and how do you know where you're at? And I know there's got to be some kind of a digital micrometer on the end of your fingertips or something, or deep inside
or the back
here.
of my head somewhere. Yeah. I think that the answer is obviously practice.
Yeah.
And you don't start out doing huge forms. You start out small, you learn your capacities, then you push that a little bit. You know, there was the era that I got up to 12 inches, and then I better go to 14 or 16, and then I got to 16, and I'm like, well, I better go a little farther. The deepest that I've gone so far is 37 inches off the tool rest, but that's with an 8-foot long tool. And it's still very exciting. In fact, it's more critical at depth than it is when you're close to your point of support.
Sure, yeah.
You know, everything magnifies larger. So, but you get there with the excitement and the challenge of what you're doing. And the primary rule that I set for myself from the very outset was I wanted to be able to make the last cut as effectively and accurately as the first cut when I went inside of a form. So it wasn't just to go to depth, but it was to do it with great quality and finesse.
Yes.
As I'm learning how to go.
And finish.
Yeah.
So you have developed your own tools to do this?
I have. Like a lot of other turners, I work with tools that I have worked with over the years and developed in those designs. And I sell some of them. I sell my gouges, I sell my hollowing tools, and I made DVDs to tell people and explain, tutorial DVDs, so that other people can do it as well.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, the more people doing it, the better. I don't feel like such an anomaly at that point. And so they're available through the wood turning catalogs, and then you can get them off of my website.
What's your website?
That's www.ellsworthstudios.com.
Okay.
It's a dual website between myself and my wife, who is a bead artist, so you get to look at more than just wood turning.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that I always, when I see fantastic artists such as you, when you put a piece of, when you see the piece of wood that you cut, you turn most of your vessels green, right? So then, as you I don't know if you go at it all the way from the chainsaw. When does the creative process start as to what you? Yeah.
Well, I do start with a chainsaw as opposed to a bandsaw. I don't object to that, and I do use a bandsaw for very small pieces, of course. But I work fundamentally with a basic idea of what I'm looking at as a species or a nature of a piece of wood, whether it's a tree trunk or a piece of spalted wood or a burl or whatever. And I judge what I can get out of that by height and diameter. And then I put that on the lathe without a preconception idea of what it's going to be, trying to remain as spontaneous to the material in the process as I can. And then once I've roughed it out and I begin to see what's there, I will make adjustments to that.
Okay.
And as I keep going with those adjustments, the whole concept begins to come together. And that's when the magic happens, is when you finally get there. And I think also in the past, many times, I've inadvertently touched the wood with the tool before I touched the tool rest and put a big gouge in it, you know. So now I've got to cut that gouge out and reshape the piece. And of course, it always ends up better the second time than it was the first time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But I try and keep it as spontaneous as possible.
Yeah. It's a process, and you can step into it. You can tap dance around it at any point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the value of the process is not something that people understand how important that really is. I think that today, working with so many students, they're so interested in the finished product, you see, the quote-unquote product, what they're going to do with it, or what it might be worth, or whether the grandchildren want any more, or something like that. And I'm much more interested in the process. And when I get to the end, I will have the object, call it the product if you wish, and then I can evaluate whether it was worth it or not. Because some of them are good and some of them are dogs.
Right. Well, yeah, sure. I talk about that. It's close to me because I'm a furniture maker by education. So I've gone through a formal education in Denmark and became a furniture maker.
Gotcha.
And we know what we are going to make. There's usually a plan, and that is where you get.
Yeah.
And that is what is so intriguing to me about turning, that it is a creative process where a furniture maker makes a plan. You know, there's going to be 4 drawers here, drawer slide, or whatever it is. Even if it's a chair, it doesn't have that process.
Well, there are forms in turning, like segmented work, which is exactly the same. You start with a drawing, and you plug the piece of wood into it. But it's like color photography. You know what you're going to get when you start out.
Right.
The way I do it is much more spontaneous. So it's more like black and white photography. You're fiddling with it in the darkroom, so to speak.
Okay, yeah.
And then you just have to, over the years, you have to develop the confidence that what you come up with is what you were capable of coming up with that day, at that moment. And then do another one, and another day, and et cetera. And then pretty soon you begin to build a body of work, and then you begin to find yourself within your work.
David, on the table here in front of us, you have one of your signature pieces. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. What we call a signature gouge is a tool that's made by both Crown and Henry Taylor in England, and I endorse both of the companies because they make excellent tools. And it's the same shape, same design for each of them. This is a jig that I made up also that allows me to sharpen and shape the tip so that it's consistent all the time.
Okay.
Which is critical because a lot of my students, of course, are working with this tool throughout the world, whether they've been students of mine or not, and they need to be able to maintain this very complex shape at all times so that it'll do the 5 different things that it's supposed to do by design. And I think like all tools that are efficient, it's also versatile. But it comes from the principles of other tools that were also very efficient. It's just that what I've done is take all those ideas and pack it into one unit.
Okay.
And as I'm demonstrating this tool and working with students, or as I'm working myself on my own work, I need to have something that I can do very massive cuts to remove a lot of material, and then come right back and make an absolute pure cut to begin sanding on the pieces. And it saves me having to lug a whole bunch of tools around.
Sure, yeah.
But it's an interruption when you're working with something that you're so intimately connected with, to have to set that tool down and
Sure.
pick another one up, and then set that down and pick another one up.
Of course, yeah.
But
Makes a lot of sense.
the shape itself works on principles that came out of Ireland and Scotland and England back prior to the 1980s. And in about 1982, I was able to blend the series together and come up with a very specific shape that I then call my own.
Okay.
So it's an amalgamation of a bunch of characters, all of whom are good friends of mine. And I tease them, of course, that if they'd only learned how to sharpen it like I did at the very beginning, they wouldn't have so much trouble with their work. But we're all good buds, so it helps a lot.
That's good.
The nice thing about being of any age is that you can start learning, even when you're in advanced ages. And I'll tell you, the oldest man that I've had as a student took my class in Pennsylvania when he was 95. He's now 103 and he's still turning. John Marsland is his name. He lives in Easton, Maryland. And what a statement to the desire to learn more things at any age. So we get him young. The youngest I've ever had on a lathe was 6 years old, and he was sitting on my lap. And I was, surrounded him, holding on to the tool, and his hands actually, while he held onto the tool. And for all purposes, he was turning the little spindle. So it's a terrifically versatile field. Not expensive to get involved in, like a woodworker would be, because you don't have to buy a huge amount of equipment by comparison to a woodworker, a furniture maker.
Sure.
So it's very exciting, and of course the people are just wonderful. And there are not that many of us out there, so every time you meet a woodturner, you always got something to talk about. Well, I think that from a creative process, what wood turning is very much like throwing clay on a wheel or blowing glass or beading. It's a centering process. You're taking all the things that you know and many of the things that you don't know, but you're focusing your entire energy into a very small quadrant, and you're working with that as it's spinning and spinning and changing, and you're 100% responsible for what you're doing, which is wonderful. You can't blame anybody else when you get the tool caught in the wood. And when you have those successes, you're responsible for that as well. It's a very immediate centering process. And I don't know many things in life other than race driving where you are so concentrated on something and you're so focused on something that it involves your entire being when you're not thinking about it. It's when you start thinking about it that you get into trouble, of course. Am I holding it the right way or whatever? As it becomes a process that you gain more confidence in, then you begin to flow. I think Toshiko Takaetsu said it very well once in her work in ceramics. She said, when the clay is right, the clay sings. And it's very much the same in wood turning. When the process is going well, when things are working for you, you don't think about it. The material is singing back to you. And it's very spontaneous and quite wonderful in that respect. Okay, you want to turn that other bowl, that little one? The 15-minute bowl? It's a lot of pressure on me to do this,